Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistell with my co-hosts Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott. And tonight we will be breaking down our bussin', discussing, and mid players, pitting CJ Stroud versus Dak Prescott, Devon Achane versus David Montgomery, and our flex off Cortland Sutton versus Jerry Jeudy. And of course, our panic button players in Ring the Alarm for Week 10. Let's get it popping. Drew, Rhett, Week 10 is here. It's almost surreal. It's almost sad to say that we are this close to finishing the fantasy football season. But nonetheless, there's a ton of football left. But how was your Week 9, Rhett?
Oh, this is the week where the bye apocalypse actually hit me, where in one league I had to sit Travis Etienne because he was on bye. And not surprisingly, I lost that week. And this week is a couple leagues where I have to sit my tour de force that is AJ Brown and my AJ Brown Jalen Hurts stack in another league this week, which also, by the way, there's a DeAndre Swift share that I have to sit. So I'm not imagining this week is going to go too much better. But you know what? It's fine. We're having fun. Most of those leagues, I'm firmly in the playoff hunt. So hopefully this doesn't affect me too badly.
Yes, sir. Week 10 is here. Drew, how many wins you need to get into the Scott Fishbowl playoffs, brother?
The points would be a lot easier than the wins, and even that would be difficult. Scott Fishbowl's rough, man. That one's kind of just chalked up as a loss. I'm still setting my lineup. I'm still participating. I'm never going to completely quit, but that one's pretty much an L. But both of my dynasty leagues, the rebuilds are going just as planned. I actually just took over the spot for the 101 in my home dynasty league, which is that's the goal in that league. It's one quarterback. I want Marvin Harrison Jr. So
yeah, you do.
My league was set up for me to do that. My team was, and so everything's working out as planned. And then all my other redraft leagues outside of Scott Fishbowl are going very well. Teams are right in the thick of it, looking like we're going to be playoff bound. So other than Scott Fishbowl, everything's good. That one stings though.
Yeah, I'm 2 wins away from clinching a Scott Fishbowl playoff berth. I got the points, so I'm sitting there. I'm in the top 1,000. 1 week away. If I can get this week covered, I'm in, and I don't got to worry about the next week. Speaking of Marvin Harrison, it is the college football fantasy playoffs starting this week. There's 3 weeks left for that, and then that's over. That's really depressing for me. I'm in a few leagues where I got a good chance, couple buys, so I'm excited for that. But that's Week 9, and we move on to Week 10. Let's hop into the news and injury reports. All right, fellas, this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. For 9 weeks, I have come in here and dropped bad news report after bad news report of popped Achilles, ACLs, concussions, players missing practices. But this week, Week 10, we are going to fire it off with some good news only. Those managers that practiced patience over desperation, the fantasy gods are about to reward you with some studs about to come back into the game. Justin Jefferson had his practice window open. And if you didn't buy the fade of everyone telling you that the Minnesota Vikings were possibly going to sit Justin Jefferson because their season is probably close to an end, you got to realize that the Minnesota Vikings are paying this guy top dollar. And in order to get the return on their investment, they need Justin Jefferson on the field. Justin Jefferson's going to play football again. James Conner is going to come back. His practice window is open. David Montgomery is expected back this week. Devon Achane expected back Week 11. Kyler Murray is starting this weekend for the Arizona Cardinals. Martavius Bryant is back in the NFL. And so is everyone's favorite redhead, Carson Wentz, to the Rams. Drew, you must be ecstatic for that dresser win is over. Carson Wentz is in.
Yeah, 2016 Drew is very excited because that's who whenever the Rams traded for the number 1 overall pick, that's who I was banging the table for them to take. So that guy is very excited. Now, present day Drew makes me a little bit nervous that Stafford might be a little bit, a little bit worse off than we thought because I mean the bye week is here for the Rams. They're not playing this week.
Yeah.
So if they don't, I don't think they would bring Wentz in if they thought Stafford was going to be back after the bye. So I'm nervous for Stafford, but we get more chuck it balls from Wentz in the NFL again. So,
yeah.
The,
at the very
NFL
least, it raises the value of the 2 wide receivers that we also hope can get some of that fantasy value back in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, because it just wasn't promising with Dresser Winder playing quarterback. And like you said, if Matt Stafford does miss an extensive period of time, Carson Wentz at the very, very least gives us hope. But with every good news, we got to share some bad news. There is some significant injury reports around the NFL from this past week. Jamar Chase did not practice today. It is a situation to monitor with that back injury. So keep attention to Jamar Chase throughout the week. Justin Fields is out for Thursday Night Football with that hand injury. Josh Downs did not return to the game with the knee injury on Sunday. Cam Akers is out for the season, rupturing his Achilles on the opposite foot that he had already ruptured. I feel so bad for the kid. He was really starting to come on there in Minnesota. Daniel Jones out for season with the non-contact ACL injury, and Dallas Goedert, rest of season injury. He's gone for the rest of the season with that. I believe it's a fractured forearm. Was that confirmed?
I don't know. Dallas but Jorge finally wins. Dallas Goedert is no longer a must start.
I'm telling you, the all IR team this year is just popping. I mean, I think someone read Derwin James's lips on the Monday night game, and he said Aaron Rodgers will be back in a couple weeks. So, I don't know what is going on with the NFL this year, but it's a wild ride. So let's hop into the NFL Week 10 segment of Bussin', Discussin', and Mid.
Go and try your luck. Touch me in again, we let it rain. Keep on start us up. Got that black and white, that yin and yang. Mr. Officer, please don't search us. We don't.
Just to note, anyone watching on Twitter, we cannot see your comments, so hop over to YouTube, drop a comment in the comment section, and we will answer your questions live on air. Boys, Week 10 is here. Time for some Bussin', Discussin' Mid. Drew's been on fire lately in this segment here. I think he was near perfect last week, near perfect the week before. He has been lighting it up. And so what we're going to give you here with Bussin' is our top play of the week outside of the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, and top 12 QBs. Drew, hit us off at the top, man.
All right, so there's no doubt that the Seahawks passing attack hasn't been what we hoped for fantasy purposes this year, but there's nothing quite like a matchup against the Washington Commanders to lift your spirits. And so this week, busting for me is wide receiver Tyler Lockett. He gets to go up against the Commanders' defense that's given up the second most fantasy points above expectation to the wide receiver position. And that was before they decided to gut their entire pass rush at the trade deadline, which will now give Geno Smith even more time in the pocket and allow Tyler Lockett even more time to get open down the field as he does so well. Now, since Seattle's Week 5 bye, Tyler Lockett has led the Seattle pass catchers in targets, receptions, catch rate, end zone targets. It only has one less first read target than DK Metcalf. So with how involved he's been over the last few weeks, the plus matchup he has against Washington, I think he's a smash play for you this week. Fantasy Pros Week 10 ECR has Lockett as wide receiver 22, but I've got him up at wide receiver 17.
Yeah, I love it. I love the play. I almost picked Tyler Lockett for the segment myself, just because of the matchup, what he's going to be doing in that offense for the Seattle Seahawks. The next player that Rhett's going to drop here, I also consider Rhett another wide receiver that is busting for you this week. This time it is...
Man, it is very simple. We're going to stay within that same matchup, but we're going to roll with Jahan Dotson against the Seattle Seahawks secondary.
We got a wide receiver battle.
Wide receiver battle, wide receiver face off, whatever you want to call it. And that's because Dotson this week is heading in as the ECR wide receiver 33 and coming off his best 2 weeks of the season Last couple weeks, he had 8 for 108 yards and a touchdown. And then last week, 4 for 69 yards and another touchdown. And facing a Seattle Seahawks defense where they are giving up, I believe this number is accurate, 30 fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. And on top of that, we are looking at a offense that, surprise, surprise, thank you so much props to Andrew Cooper on Twitter for bringing this to light for me, is the fact that Sam Howell is chucking the ball around the yard in this Bieniemy offense. Sam Howell is first in pass attempts. He's first in completions in the league. He is second in passing yards with 2,471. So we can just put this out there and say that the Washington Commanders are throwing it left and right and everywhere, and everybody's eating in that offense. We've seen Logan Thomas have some weeks, Terry McLaurin have some weeks, Curtis Samuel have some weeks, even Antonio Gibson has come out of the dead once or twice this season, and Brian Robinson. So good offense all around. And there seems to be big work coming for Jahan Dotson in the coming weeks, now that he's finally starting to establish some of that trust with Sam Howell. This season, he doesn't have a lot of red zone targets, only 6 red zone targets on the season, but all of them are in the end zone. And as we've seen so far in his young career, he does have a nose for the end zone, had 7 touchdowns last season. And even with a slow start this season, still has 3 receiving touchdowns so far this year. And this is a Seattle defense to further drive this point home. They've given up 4 100-plus yard receiving games, receiving touchdowns to 8 different players this season. The Fantasy Pros projection for Dotson this week is 3.8 receptions for around 50 yards. I mean, for me, if we're looking at the fact that the Commanders have had so much volume, it's very possible we could see another 5-catch, 70-yard, and possibly a touchdown for a third successive week for Jahan Dotson. So he's a guy I feel comfortable firing up because with the Samuel injury and the fact that he's kind of been able to emerge, we've seen a lot of good things out of Dotson in the past couple weeks. After a lot of preseason hype, it didn't seem like it was going to come to life.
Yeah, the first half of the season was rough for Jahan Dotson. It's nice to see him come on the past couple weeks. So I'm excited for him this week against the Seahawks. So far we got Tyler Lockett and Jahan Dotson as our bussin' players heading into week 10. For me, I'm going to get a little off script here. I'm not going to pick an individual player. I'm going to pick a team defense. And this week I'm rolling with the Chicago Bears Fantasy Pros ECR ranked team 15 overall. Guys, they play Thursday night. Justin Fields is not playing. And I kind of like that a bit more because I think if Justin Fields was to play, the game script could get a little bit out of hand and Carolina could be looking up to put some of those garbage time points. But with Tyson Bagent playing, I think the game is going to be a lot closer than what we think. Thursday night against the Carolina Panthers, you want the home team. Carolina's traveling, less recovery time, less time learning the game plan. You want the team that has spent the most time at home in their environment preparing, and that is the Chicago Bears. The Bears haven't been that good as a defense against good teams, but against bad teams, they are a plus, averaging 11.6 fantasy points between weeks 5 and 7, where they face the Commanders. Jaron Hall led Vikings, and the last game of Josh McDaniels' tenure with the Las Vegas Raider. Like I said, they get the Carolina Panthers this week, who are a bad team, scoring the 7th fewest points per game over the last 3 weeks, and over the season, the 7th fewest points per game. Panthers last week against the Indianapolis Colts threw 3 interceptions, 2 for touchdowns. They had 4 sacks against and 1 fumble. Bears got new edge Montez Sweat, who's looking to hunt QBs. The Panthers have given up 4 interceptions and 15 sacks over the last 4 games. Those are some ruthless numbers. Short rest, rookie QB, traveling to Chicago. I'm starting the Bears DST. I think in sleeper leagues, they're only rostered 3%. So fire up the Bears DST this week and don't look back. Our bussin' players are Tyler Lockett, right? Yeah, Tyler Lockett.
Yes, sir.
Drew Blake on first name.
That's him.
I was saying Tyson,
He's him.
Tyler. Yeah, exactly. Jahan Dotson and Chicago Bears DST. Now we're going to pivot to our discussing players of Week 10, and these are players that are ranked pretty high at their position, but we don't think are going to hit that projected total. Drew, you're doing it to me again. I think this is the second time you had this guy on your discussion list, man. I'm starting to think you're just doing it to hurt me a little bit because I've been picking on you, and I think you just want, you want to come back with a nice little left jab. So we're going to skip you. We're going to go right to Rhett with his player. Now, go ahead, Drew, man. Go ahead.
I'm doing it because he's hurt me. My Scott Fishbowl team that's dead. Like he's the lead man in it. So
Hey, I got Deshaun Watson on my Scott Fishbowl team. I seem to be doing pretty good, my man.
We don't got to talk about that, Chris. All right, because the other reason that my Scott Fishbowl team, other than my poor drafting choices, struggling is because of a head coach that I'm going to have yet another gripe with here toward the end of the show. So it's not all Deshaun Watson's fault, but we're gonna talk about other pieces of it later on. But look, I mean, nothing against Deshaun Watson, but last week I told you that starting Geno Smith on the road against the Ravens was a bad idea. He ended up with a whopping 13 completions on 28 attempts for 157 passing yards and 1 touchdown, with an additional 2 passing yards. He came in with just under 3 fantasy points on the week and was the quarterback 29 on the week. Rinse, wash, repeat. This week, I think it's a bad idea to start Deshaun Watson on the road against this Baltimore Ravens defense. Before last week, they had given up the second lowest amount of fantasy points above expectation to the quarterback position. But after that impressive showing against Seattle, they've now leapfrogged the New York Jets, and they've given up the least amount of fantasy points above expectation to the quarterback position. And they've been even more impressive whenever they've been at home. And that includes games against CJ Stroud and Jared Goff as well, including the game against Geno last week. And I know Watson looked pretty good last week. He was pushing the ball downfield probably better than I've seen him do all year. His throws 15-plus yards downfield looked really good. But we also have to keep in mind that was against an Arizona Cardinals defense that's given up the 5th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the quarterback position. So this is not apples to apples what he did against Arizona compared to what he's got to deal with this weekend. So until he shows me otherwise, I'm going to continue to treat Deshaun Watson as a streaming option at quarterback, that you should start him in good matchups and you should sit him in bad matchups. And this week is definitely not a good matchup. At Fantasy Pros Week 10 ECR, they have him down at quarterback 20, but I've got him down at quarterback 23 to the point where even in Superflex leagues, you might be able to pivot off of him and not have to start him this week.
Yep. That's fair, man. That's fair. I get it. The matchup. I'm a big proponent of sitting guys in real negative matchups, and quarterbacks versus Baltimore, like you said, just haven't been hitting the points for us. We got a question here from Dulguitar_7888. I'm 6-3 and I have Stephon Diggs and Amari Cooper. Someone is offering me Chris Olave and T. Higgins. Thoughts? This is a dynasty league. Rhett?
6-3 win now mode. I'd say hold the line with a guy like Diggs. I mean, he's one of the top 3 receivers in fantasy this year. I mean, you're going to just stay with that. If you have a chance to win a chip, Chris Olave and T. Higgins, to put it lightly, have been hit or miss this season. Yeah. So I would say hold the line and stick with what you have in terms of your current team.
Even with the dynasty aspect?
Right now, I'm also in a win now situation in one of my dynasty leagues. And my mindset is if you have a chance to win a chip, you go all in and you figure it out later. So that's where I am
forever, baby. Flakes fly forever. There you go.
Yep, I would agree.
Yep. Go ahead. Yep. There you go.
I agree with Rhett.
Yep. Love it. All right, Rhett. With the great insight, follow it up with your discussing player of week 10.
I feel like we're all here just to kind of stab you in the heart this week, Chris, in terms of the discussing segment, because I'm going with your guy and my guy, and we both love him, but that doesn't mean it's not a poor matchup for him. Alvin Kamara in Minnesota. Yes, I'm a New Orleans Saints fan. Yes, he is stepping into this week as the ECR running back 4. What we're also stepping into is a guy that has had a declining snap share for every week this season. We'll run that through you real quick. Week 4, Tampa Bay, 54.5%. Week 5, New England, 51.8%. Week 6, Houston, 51.6%. Week 7, Jacksonville, 48.2%. Week 8, Indianapolis, 46.3%. Week 9, Chicago, 38% snap share. So over the past 5 or 6 games, we have seen his usage and his snap share go down every single week, and that's an alarming trend for me, especially when we consider that so far this season, outside of the receptions, he's been extremely inefficient. And he showed that last week, carrying the ball only 9 times for 26 yards, even though he did have 4 receptions for 46 yards. He's averaged 3.6 yards per carry for the year, and he's been buoyed by his pass value. But is that worsening because of the fact that the New Orleans Saints seem to finally be focusing a little more of their efforts on the downfield passing game in the past 3 weeks, and a Minnesota defense that is giving up 3.7 yards per carry to running backs this season? It's bad for 2 reasons, because like we said, Kamara is inefficient. And number 2, to be honest, most running backs, if they're inefficient, they rely on the goal line stuff. And we have a goal line Taysom problem in New Orleans, so Alvin Kamara is not getting those goal line carries. Taysom Hill is. Like we said, that offense is better. So that early reliance they had on Alvin Kamara, which in that debut game, keep in mind, he had 13 receptions. He's had a 7-reception game. He's had a 12-reception game. He's had some insane reception outputs this season. I don't know if we're going to see quite that level of usage again. And with the inefficiency that he's had, I believe the yards per route run is something like 1.66 yards per route run this season and 6.6 yards per reception. I mean, he has not really been that explosive Alvin Kamara. If you look on PFF, I believe his breakaway rate or his explosive run rate is well down. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 27% this year, where normally for his career, he's been in that 35 to 40% range. So this is not the same guy we've been dealing with the past several seasons. Yeah. That offense is better, and they're currently up to 13th overall in total offense for the season. And surprise, surprise, as they've used Alvin Kamara less, that offensive efficiency has gone up. So I don't think that's an accident when we're talking about that. So these trends are alarming. So to call Alvin Kamara the running back 4 this week is hard for me to say. I can't back that up with an inefficient running back who has been trending to a reduced role in the past few weeks.
Yeah, all solid points there. I read a stat somewhere as well that I'm going to try to find it and pull it up before the end of the show here, that when the Saints underutilize Alvin Kamara, their win percentage is much higher than when he's heavily involved in their offensive attack. We got a follow-up question by Dole Guitar here. He says, would you do Puka and Cooper, so Puka Nacua and Amari Cooper, for Chris Olave and T. Higgins? Drew, you're on mute there, buddy.
So that's still tough. I mean, so you took out Stephon Diggs and you did Puka instead. You know, you're 6-3, like you said earlier. I think Olave and Higgins are pretty close for me. Looking at my dynasty stuff here.
Yeah, I don't hate it too much, because you're not sure what's going to happen with Higgins next year if he moves away from Cincinnati, considering it's a dynasty league, right?
Right. Yeah. So Olave, in this instance, Olave would probably be the most valuable asset in dynasty for me. It's close between him and Puka. Amari Cooper is the clear least valuable asset in this trade, but win now wise, with how good Watson did look last week. Again, I already talked about, I don't think it's going to be a good week this week, but rest of the season, you know, Amari could be just as good as some of these guys in this trade. But long term, looking at it from a dynasty aspect, I think that Puka and Amari, I think I'd be willing to part with those guys for Olave and Higgins.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was starting to say we're getting a little bit closer to the neighborhood, but now we're looking at a Puka Nacua who down the line, let's be honest, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later on as to what that long-term future may look like. And Amari Cooper, like we said, being the least valuable asset among these 4. I feel like in terms of the average value, I think that second package with Olave and Higgins is a little bit higher than what you would get versus a little more consistent, shall I say, as compared to the Nacua Amari Cooper package.
Yep. There you go. So for discussing, we've already had Deshaun Watson. We've had Alvin Kamara, my co-host here. I've just been beating me up. So I'm going to make myself feel better, and I'm going to insert a Tampa Bay Buccaneer as my discussing player for Week 10. And that is none other than running back Rachaad White, Fantasy Pros ECR RB17 on the week, coming off a big 2-touchdown game. heavily involved in with the passing work with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. During his last 3 games, White has given you 44.7 total fantasy points. That's 14.9 points per game. He's rushed the ball 42 times for 146 yards. That's a 3.4 yards per carry, which is going to leave you wanting more from Rachaad White, and he has the 2 scores. In the receiving game, he has stacked on 181 yards and 17 receptions on 17 targets. So the kid has been good in the passing game, and when he's involved in the passing game, he's been a viable fantasy asset. But this week, he draws the Tennessee Titans, who've allowed only one running back rush for 100 or more yards. That was Zach Moss in week 5. And White's production, like I mentioned, comes mainly from that receiving game, and the Titans have only allowed 1 receiving tight end or 1 receiving touchdown to the position on the season, and that was Jerome Ford in week 3. Now, pass catching running backs are averaging 2.8 receptions, 21 yards, and pretty much no touchdowns against the Tennessee Titans. They have been susceptible to allowing some RB2 finishes on the years. They've allowed 2 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 games. So the possibility for Rachaad White to have a good game is there. But like I said, his production comes from when he's involved in the passing game, and the fact that the Tennessee Titans defense is elite against pass-catching running backs. My projection for Rachaad White this week, 12 carries, 40 yards, 4 receptions, 35 yards. So again, decent day. If he gets a touchdown, he can move into that RB2 range. But because of the matchup, Rachaad White for me this week is disgusting. So just to go over our discussing players again, Deshaun Watson, Alvin Kamara, and Rachaad White. Our bussin' players at the top of the segment, Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson, and Chicago Bears DST. Now we pivot into our mid players of week 10, our favorite QB2, wide receiver 3, 4, RB2 to 4, back end, tight end 1 to 3. Pretty much our favorite flex plays, our safest plays of the week, guys that we think are going to, at the very least, hit their floor. Those are our mid players of the week. What's up, Jamie? Thanks for tuning in. Missed the beginning, but always love catching your show. We always appreciate you, Jamie. In the chat. Yes, sir. Drew, hit him off with your mid player of the week, man.
All right, so last week, Deontay Foreman's workload was anything but mid. While we continue, Jamie came in at such a bad time. While we continue to wait for the Roschon Johnson takeover that I was promised by so many this offseason, Foreman racked up 20 carries for 83 yards, coming out to just over 4 yards a carry against a pretty tough Saints run defense. And meanwhile, Roschon had less than 6 touches for the first time this season, other than the game he suffered an injury. And that hurt me personally because I picked up Roschon in a redraft league where I was hoping this would be whenever he emerged with Khalil Herbert on IR. Now, Foreman, he's very TD dependent if you're looking for a big game because he gives you next to nothing as a pass catcher. And you do have the possibility that Khalil Herbert could come off IR and could be active for this game as well. Although high ankle sprains are historically difficult injuries for players to just jump right back in where they left off. So even if Herbert does play, I wouldn't expect him to go back to that lead role that he had prior to the high ankle sprain. So I think we have at least one more Deontay Foreman week here. So those are the factors that make Foreman a mid play and not a bussin' play because the matchup is anything but mid. And if there wasn't the Khalil Herbert factor, I might have had him in the bussin' section instead. The Carolina Panthers have given up the second most fantasy points above expectation to the running back position. And the only team that's been worse has been the historically terrible Denver Broncos run defense. So, I mean, this is about as good as a matchup gets for a running back's sake. Now, again, I talked about Herbert. He might end up cutting into the workload. Roschon's not going to go away. Like he is still going to get some work. Hey, look, Jamie, I kept that league that I have Roschon in. I kept him on my bench just in case. I almost dropped him, but I was like, man, I know as soon as I drop him, this is going to be the week that for some reason they just decided to hand Roschon 20 carries instead of Foreman. And this call is going to look bad, and I'll look even worse for dropping him. So I'm hedging my bets a little bit, and I'm holding on to Roschon just in case. But, I mentioned Foreman. He's not going to give you anything in the passing game, but given the matchup, given the carries he got last week and could potentially get this week again. And then the chances of getting in the end zone as a running back are much better against Carolina than they are against the New Orleans Saints. So for me, he's my mid play for week 10. Fantasy Pros week 10 ECR has Foreman as the running back 25. I've got him up at the running back 21. So I think he's, firmly in the mid to low running back 2 territory.
As mid can get right there with everything you just broke down on Donta Foreman. Rhett, hit us with your mid player of the week, man.
All right. I was high on this guy heading into the season, and Colby Conway talked me onto this ledge. Then I talked myself off of this ledge when the slow start happened. But Dalton Schultz has arrived, people. We are here. There's 5 weeks of solid production going on after a slow start, and he's coming off of a gigantic 10 catch for 130-yard performance last week. And to make matters better, he's playing the Cincinnati Bengals defense, which is allowing 15.24 points per game against tight ends, according to NFL.com. That is the 4th worst in the league. They are giving up the 8th most receptions to tight ends. They're giving up an 80.3% catch rate, and they've given up the 5th most yards to tight ends overall this season. So to put it lightly, he is walking into a juicy matchup. He has a 21.1% dominator rating for the season, according to Player Profiler. If you know anything about dominator rating, it is the percentage of a player's percentage of total receiving yards and total receiving touchdowns. 21.1% is very good. Anything over 20% is considered elite. So he is on a very good track so far this season. Has averaged 7.2 targets per game for the last 5 weeks. He has 4 top 6 finishes at the position so far this season. And Drew had this conversation a couple weeks ago talking about, oh, well, if Tank Dell's playing, Dalton Schultz doesn't have any more value. Well, bud, they both ate last week. And I'm happy to say,
how many times did Stroud throw the ball last week?
A lot. He threw it a lot. But you know what? Can I ask you this? With that running game, do you see them doing anything other than throwing the ball a lot for the remainder of the season?
No, they should just let Stroud throw the ball every single play.
Let Stroud cook, baby. And Dalton Schultz and Tank Dell and Nico Collins and all these dudes are going to benefit off of that. The Fantasy Pros projection for Dalton Schultz this week is about 4.5 receptions for 50 yards. Based off the way he's trended the past several weeks, I'm thinking it's more like a 7 for 70 game this week, which would give him another top 10 tight end week, which would put him firmly along where he is right now, which is the ECR tight end 7 for this week. I mean, he's such a solid floor play right now. If you're looking for tight end help, if you can get Dalton Schultz, he's probably as difficult as he's going to be to get this season. And trade deadlines have probably already passed, so good luck getting him unless he's dropped, which probably isn't going to happen at this point. But Dalton Schultz, man, he's been rock solid these past 5 weeks. I don't see a reason for it to stop at this point.
Yes, sir. That's our mid plays right there. So far, Drew gave us Donta Foreman. Rhett gave us Dalton Schultz. We got a viewer one from Jamie. He's given us Jerry Jeudy in my top 24 while other people are benching him. Stick around, Jamie, because in the debate segment after this, we got a flex off of Cortland Sutton versus Jerry Jeudy with Drew going against Rhett. I just combined you two. It's perfect. Just combined you both.
Is going to be dreadful.
All right. So let's get into the last one. I've given you the condom wide receiver of the week for my mid player. I've given you the abstinence player of the week for my mid player. And last week, did Michael Thomas abstain from scoring any points? Yes, he did. So I guess I'll chalk that up as a win in my eyes because he did not score any points. So I don't know where to go from here. Do I give you my promiscuous mid player of the week? But the guy I got on this sheet right here doesn't scream promiscuous, and that is none other than McCorkle Jones. 5 touchdown passes over the last 3 weeks. The Patriots have averaged 21 points per game through that time. Mac Jones is top 10 in total pass attempts at the position. This week, they draw the Indianapolis Colts, who allow at least 30 pass attempts per game over the last 3 games and 35 per game on the season. Currently ranked as the 26th total defense. The Colts are allowing 360 total yards against per game. Teams have been able to average nearly 30 points per game versus Indy. That's fifth worst on the year. It's a good matchup for Mac, who is one of the top QBs in the league and completion percentage versus zone defense, a scheme that the Colts run 84.6% of the time. That is league leading. And they got one of the best wide receivers in Demario Douglas, who is going to find the soft spots in the Indianapolis Colts zone to benefit McCorkle Jones. Mac Jones being money in the red zone is also why he's a safe play. He's the QB3 in red zone completion percentage. His touchdown rate isn't quite there, though, so that doesn't match what his completion percentage is and how good he has been in the red zone. But against this high-playing zone defensive team that the Indianapolis Colts is, I'm expecting the New England Patriots to come out there and just dominate the Indianapolis Colts. 80% reception rate versus zone is Demario Douglas, averaging 15.7 yards per reception against the scheme, with Bourne out of the picture, a player who flourished as a Patriot in schemes that attacked zone defenses. Douglas and Jones should have a nice day. I'm expecting a 18 to 20 point outing for McCorkle this week. That is my mid play of the week. Going over all of our Bussin' discussing players for week 10. Bussin' Drew hit us with Tyler Lockett, Rhett with Jahan Dotson, and for me, it was the Chicago Bears DST. Our discussing players, Drew gave us Deshaun Watson, Rhett hit us with Alvin Kamara, and I dropped Rashad White. Our mid players of the week, Drew gave us Donta Foreman, Rhett hit us with Dalton Schultz, and I gave you Mac Jones. Again, anyone watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube, drop a question in the chat. We cannot see the Twitter questions, and we will answer them live on the air. We appreciate everyone who's watching right now and in the chat dropping questions. Please like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy in Frames team drops new content. Most importantly, head over to www.fantasyinframes.com to find all of our written articles, rankings, all of the video content is posted there. Follow at Fantasy in Frames across all social media platforms. That's Bussin', Discussin', and Mid for week 10. Let's head into Master Debation. All right, we got a question in the chat before we hop in. Rugaroo, welcome back to the show. Flex 1, Tank, Gus, and Godwin. Drew?
It would be between Tank and Godwin for me. I know Gus had the 2 touchdowns last week, but he was out carried by both Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill. Granted, a lot of the Keaton Mitchell work came in garbage time, but it would be tough to depend on to be that touchdown dependent. I've technically got Godwin ahead of Tank in my rankings for week 10. That matchup against Tennessee is just so juicy for fantasy receivers, but I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to go Tank off the heater that he just came off of either. It would be close between those two guys for me, but right now, according to my rankings, I'll lean Godwin.
Yep. Rhett, any take on that? You're leaning Godwin as well?
I'm leaning Tank Dell. It's simply, like I said, coming off of the heater of the week, coming off of the fact that the Texans – we just discussed it, are emerging as a big-time pass offense with that scheme that they've got going on. A little bit San Francisco reminiscent, but a little bit more pass-heavy. So, it's hard to ignore what they're doing right now, especially with the way C.J. Stroud has been playing and getting better as the year's gone on.
Could be a heater against Cincinnati, too. That could end up being a shootout. So, Cincinnati-Houston should be a fun game. Cincinnati's been kind of middle of the pack against receivers in terms of fantasy points above expectations. So, definitely room for Tank to have a big game as well. I really don't think you can go wrong between those two guys. But me personally, I would stay away from Gus. So that's my way of telling you Gus ends up with 4 touchdowns somehow.
Thanks for the question, Rugaroo. This is Master Debation, a segment on our show where one host is going to give a situation to the other 2 hosts, and the other 2 hosts are going to debate the topic of the situation delivered to them. And then the judge, the host that delivered the situation, is going to pick the winner along with the viewers at home, or if you're listening to this on podcast form, feel free to reach out to @Drew3MR, @RManuelSports, or myself @FFChrisB, and let us know who you think won. Of course, also head to @Fantasy and Frames and drop your answer there as well. Let's head into it. Rhett, you got one for us right off the top, brother?
I do have one for you guys, and I want to go and just have a little bit of fun, and I want to have an all-Texas quarterback off. Rest of the schedule, I want to see you guys debate Dak Prescott versus CJ Stroud, and the winner gets to be the official quarterback of Texas forever. That's a little Easter egg for you guys. So I just want to go ahead and let us start us off. We're going to go in ABC order, as I tend to do. Chris Battistow, give us your best argument for who you're going with.
Yeah, I mean, you made a big point at the top of your argument there, is that CJ Stroud is going to do nothing but run the ball, because let's face it, the running game is just non-existent, and with the wide receivers that he's got at his disposal, CJ Stroud is probably going to throw it 1,000,000 times per game. He's already the QB7 in passing yards. He's the QB3 in yards per attempt. And then when you dive into all the efficiency metrics of both quarterbacks, he's hammering Dak Prescott everywhere, hammering him in snaps, well, he's not really hammering him dropbacks. He's beating him in dropbacks by just a little bit. Pass plays, he's got more. His A-dot's bigger. Yes, Dak's got a higher completion percentage, but we're talking rookie versus a veteran here. So let's let CJ Stroud catch up a little bit. His yards per attempt is higher, so that's going to equal more fantasy points for you. He's less sack percentage. He's averaging more points per week. So CJ Stroud is the guy that I'm going to want to roster. Plus, playoff matchup, he's got the Tennessee Titans twice. So I'm involved in CJ Stroud. And if you dive into the Tennessee Titans and what they do against the quarterbacks as a defense, yes, lately they have been pretty stout. But outside of Lamar Jackson, they have only faced Kenny Pickett, Tyler Heineke, I believe Desmond Ridder through that time. So their matchups hasn't been great. Now that CJ Stroud gets him twice in the fantasy playoffs, I'm expecting big things for the rookie quarterback rest of season. So give me CJ Stroud over Dak Prescott and that horrid Dallas Cowboys offense.
Off the rip, this man said CJ Stroud was going to run the ball, so I can only assume that his knees weak, arms are heavy. They're vomiting on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. He must be nervous. All right, so look, I love CJ. He was my QB1 in the class for real life purposes. It's been so fun to watch him flourish. However, he's not the right answer for this question for fantasy purposes. Dak, or Dakota Prescott, as you guys like to call him so much, has been cooking of late. He was the quarterback 1 overall in week 6. And then after the week 7 bye, he was the quarterback 3 in week 8 and the quarterback 2 in week 9. And funny how good things happen whenever you feature your best player. CeeDee Lamb has had 14-plus targets the last 2 weeks and been a top 3 receiver in each of the last 2 weeks as well. And Dak's had at least 30 pass attempts in every game but 2 so far. And in 5 of 8 of those games, he hasn't thrown a single interception. And play calling has even been in his favor as of late. I can't believe it myself, but Mike McCarthy, the guy that can usually never get enough of running the ball, has been calling an offense that's been 4th in neutral pass rate since week 5. I know. Mind blown. I agree. Now, his good play of late, mixed with his strength of schedule for the rest of the year, is what really makes him a potential league winner at the quarterback position. Dak has the 6th easiest remaining schedule based on fantasy points above expectation, and this includes playoff matchups against the Miami Dolphins and the Detroit Lions. And so how does this compare with CJ Stroud? He has the 15th most difficult remaining schedule, including matchups to week 14 against the New York Jets, and he has a fantasy playoff semifinal matchup against the Cleveland Browns. And even those lowly Tennessee Titans you brought up, they've been 8th against the quarterback position in fantasy points above expectation. And you mentioned the quarterbacks that they have faced that are bad. They've also played the Bengals and the Chargers, and you mentioned the Ravens. Those teams are in there along with the Kenny Pickett's and those guys too. So let's not skip over those teams as well. So I love Stroud. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. But the answer to this debate, the answer to the king of 2023 in Texas for the remainder of this year, it's Dak Prescott.
Oh, both of you guys, such compelling arguments. But there's one thing I gotta celebrate Drew for, is that homework that he's done. The past 3 weeks, Dak Prescott has been on point. That playoff schedule argument, chef's kiss. The round goes to Drew Scott, ladies and gentlemen.
That's fair. He
Love
made
to
good
see it.
arguments there. He made good arguments there. Dak's still a bum.
Texas forever, baby.
Dak's still a bum. He's still gonna burn you and throw 3 interceptions in the fantasy championship. We got a question here from Shaka. Would you trade Olave for Jefferson PPR? If you have Olave, you're trading for Jefferson. Yes.
Yeah, give me Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me the guy. Give me the guy.
Now, you would not trade Chris Olave for Van Jefferson. I will say that.
No.
It's close, but no, I think I'm holding Olave on that one.
No. Jorge Edwards, when can the entire Fifth Cruise ranking be up on your website? Drew's decision.
My ranking should be up at www.fantasyandframes.com. I'm not sure about the entire crew. I don't know what these two guys above me here are doing, but you could find mine. They should be live right now at the Fantasy and Frames website over in the redraft ranking section, which has been beautifully redesigned recently. If you haven't navigated it recently, it's very easy to get around. So, go check that out ASAP and you'll be able to find your way to the rankings rather easily.
Yes, sir. So, Drew, you took the first one. We may as well not even. I'm bitter, so we may as well not even debate the next one because I'm just going to give it to Rhett anyway. But let's have the flex off for week 10. We got Cortland Sutton versus Jerry Jeudy. Now, keep in mind, guys, this is for week 10. I don't want any rest of season arguments in this one. All right.
I fumbled the bag last week. I'm prepared this week. I'm sorry.
All right, so Rhett's going to get Cortland Sutton, and Drew is going to get Jerry Jeudy, and I'm going to give the floor to Rhett.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to lay this out for you guys, and I'm just going to say that if you're looking for a guy who has a higher ranking this week and a higher ceiling than his teammate for this week, you're going to go with Cortland Sutton. First off, let's go with the ECR rankings where Cortland Sutton is ranked higher than Jerry Jeudy as the wide receiver 30 versus the wide receiver 34. Not a big difference, but we're starting to get there, and you see where we are. Okay, second point. Cortland Sutton has found the end zone each of the past 3 weeks, whereas Jerry Jeudy has only found the end zone one time all season. Shall we continue? Well, of course we should, because
we should.
Cortland Sutton has been consistently better all season long. Jerry Jeudy, 27 receptions on 40 targets. Cortland Sutton, 33 receptions on 46 targets. So here we are, more targets, more receptions, more yards. I will say this. Jerry Jeudy does have a higher yards per reception, but it is by less than a yard, 12.4 to 11.5. Yes, Jerry Jeudy is better in that regard. But let's keep going. Let's talk wide receiver finishes for the season, shall we? Jerry Jeudy this season has finished wide receiver 84, 36, 47, 43, 87, 32, and here's the grand finale, wide receiver 17, baby.
Trending up, baby.
We're trending up, but still hot trash. Whereas Cortland Sutton has at least been better. Wide receiver 23, 48, 25, 25, 78, 18, 9, and 30. I'm not saying those are great numbers. I'm just saying they're better numbers than Jerry Jeudy's. So long story short, Jerry Jeudy has also missed a game this season. And he also has that big scarlet letter of Steve Smith calling him pretty much average. So more durable, more consistent, more trusted in their offense. Cortland Sutton this week all day.
All right, with the pen drop at the end too. Wow. All right, Rhett. Right, Drew? Let's hear why Jerry Jeudy is a better flex play than Cortland Sutton this week, my man.
I got to hand it to Rhett. Cortland Sutton absolutely has more upside as long as you're just crossing your fingers and hoping he catches a couple touchdowns, because if he doesn't catch any touchdowns, he don't do shit. What Jeudy has that Sutton hasn't is he has production without having to rely on touchdowns. Sutton has Sutton has only topped 50 receiving yards 3 times this year. And the 2 games this season that he hasn't scored a touchdown, he was the wide receiver 47 and the wide receiver 82. Hell, even last week, whenever he did score a touchdown, he was a wide receiver 37 with that because he only had 3 targets compared to Jeudy's 6. And I know, we want to talk about what they do in week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But unless those points roll over to week 10, that doesn't really matter to me. I don't care about what they did. Just like I don't care about what they do rest of the season. I don't care about what they did already. I'm worried about week 10 right now. At Jeudy, he's had 50 receiving yards in all but 2 games this year. You can count on him to get the yards. And he did find the end zone finally last week. And since week 3, Judy has led the team in first read percentage. He has a higher yards per route run, a higher ADOT. He's been more productive after the catch. He has a lower drop percentage than Sutton. He's been Russell Wilson's go-to guy based on the first read. He's got better hands. He's the better route runner. And Sutton might have had the TD luck early on, but probability says that some of that luck is eventually going to go Judy way soon, and we might have seen that cooking up last week whenever he got into the end zone. Not to mention, I've got Judy ahead of Sutton in my rankings this week. I know Rhett mentioned Fantasy Pros ECR has Sutton ahead. My rankings say that Judy's the better play, so you might as well just tell me my rankings are trash if you disagree, Chris. So come on, hit me.
Oh, don't do that to me, Drew, man. Come on.
You're on the spot. Come on, man.
Both great arguments. I didn't hear a lot of their matchup against Buffalo in either of your cases.
Oh,
there.
I got a point for you for that. Just bonus points.
Right.
The Bills have given up the 8th most fantasy points above expectation to the wide receiver position since week 5. So for both receivers, it's a juicy matchup. We're talking about guys on the same team, so I didn't bring that up. But 8th most fantasy points above expectation to the wide receiver position since week 5 for the Buffalo Bills.
Rhett, I'm gonna give you a chance to give you a little bonus. You got anything?
Drew kisses butt to the judge, and I don't have time for this. If you're gonna give it to him, give it to him, but also just understand you have to sleep at night.
All right, two great arguments. You guys made it real hard here. I'm gonna go with the ultimate flex play, Jerry Jeudy this week.
Oh.
Jerry Jeudy. I'm gonna go Jerry Jeudy. Sorry, Rhett.
Man,
Sorry, Rhett. But lately Jerry Jeudy's been the guy, man.
Weeks.
Jerry Jeudy's been the guy lately.
You could,
Drew.
you might be able to say that maybe I'm a master debater.
Oh,
yeah, maybe. maybe. Well, little do you know, me and Rhett got together and we built this segment to build your self-esteem because of how bad you've been doing at busting discussing the mid early in the season.
Right. Which is why you quit updating the spreadsheet, right? How convenient.
All right. Let's move on. Our time is limited. Let's move on. All right. Our next one here is going to give it to us by Drew.
All right. So we got a couple running backs. One that's due back this week, one that's due back next week. But we got 2 running backs that busted on the scene. And I'm curious to know rest of the season, who do you guys prefer, David Montgomery or Devon Achane? So, Chris, you've been listening to us argue for the last little bit. I want you to let me know, who do you prefer?
For me, it's Devon Achane. Yes, he's coming back 1 week later, maybe I think 2 weeks later than David Montgomery, but ultimately it's his versatility and red zone impact. Achane's higher total touchdown rate, 14.9% for 6% of David Montgomery, suggests a better red zone presence for Devon Achane over David Montgomery. He excels in receiving with superior yards per reception and catch rate, making him a versatile threat over David Montgomery, and his consistency and fantasy point production is evident. Achane's 2.8 fantasy points per opportunity surpassed Montgomery's 0.82, emphasizing his ultimate efficiency. His plus 14.10 expected fantasy points per game differential exceeds Montgomery's. You even want to guess what Montgomery's is? Plus 1.88. That's a 13-point differential between the two, demonstrating his consistent overperformance of Devon Achane. It's a lot of things that Devon Achane is going to give you that David Montgomery is just not going to do. And that's the fact that Raheem Mostert didn't take over the job like Jahmyr Gibbs did. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a factor in that Detroit Lions backfield moving forward. Devon Achane is going to come back and make it seem like Raheem Mostert was a thing of the past. Adaptability and upside potential. Achane's adaptability across various defense formations showcase his strategic prowess. David Montgomery, let's face it, is a one-trick pony. He's not getting any fantasy points if the Detroit Lions don't get within the 5-yard line. As a rookie, he offers higher growth potential compared to the more established and old David Montgomery. This is why Devon Achane is better option rest of the season.
All right, Rhett, it's on you, man. Tell us about Montgomery.
All right, we're going to start it off. We're just going to put it. So for all of this pomp and circumstance you're giving me, I'm going to let you know that the rest of season Fantasy Pros ranking, David Montgomery, running back 13. Devon Achane, running back 20. Ouch, we're off to a bad start. Let's keep rolling. Projected rest of season fantasy points, David Montgomery, 102.6. Devon Achane, 92.7. 0 for 2, Batistell. What's going on? Remaining strength of schedule, both tough draws. So the question becomes volume and who do you trust to have it? For me, that's going to be David Montgomery for this very reason. Even with Jahmyr Gibbs, we all know Dan Campbell loves himself a plotter. Jamal Williams with DeAndre Swift last year is prime evidence of that. But prior to the injury, David Montgomery had 4 top 20 finishes and 2 top 5 finishes whenever he was healthy. Detroit is as good as they can be in the league, so their game script should be positive, which means more touches for David Montgomery. Devon Achane, for everything you're talking about, I love the explosive runs, but he's practically the same guy as Raheem Mostert, which tells me outside of the fact that he's young and flashy and all these different things, I mean, what are we really going with right here? So for me, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, when you like to have a two-headed monster running back, you like to have versatility. So that just tells me that no matter what, David Montgomery is going to have a role in this offense. I have to go with that. I have to go with David Montgomery. And Drew, if you maybe go 0-2 this week and you go with Batistell, I may fight you post-podcast. So
wow, you got to threaten to get the win. Wow. Has David Montgomery ever scored 49 points this year? No.
Has Devon Achane ever bench pressed more than 130 pounds?
Probably.
Oh, probably.
With one hand. He's a dog.
Look, and y'all made this very interesting, and I was kind of on the fence with this one. Is why I wanted to hear you guys debate it. It's tough because typically down the stretch, it seems like younger running backs start to ascend while veterans running backs start to kind of decline. Younger running backs ascending is both a point in the favor for Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane. And then hearing Dan Campbell has been very, very forthcoming with his workload, and he was very, very concerned about how he was going to split up carries with how well Jahmyr Gibbs has played with David Montgomery out. So, despite what Fantasy Pros rest of season ranking says, I have to give the nod to Chris here on this one and go with Devon Achane. I'm sorry, Rhett. I got my boxing gloves on. I'm ready. Post show, we'll do what we got to do.
Oh, Rhett. I'm sorry, Rhett. Not really though. But yeah, but Drew's the champ. I mean, we're just playing for second place at the moment, man. We're just playing for second place.
Stupid.
Right?
I hate the segment. I hate the segment.
You loved it at the beginning. That is masturbation. Drew again, sweeping the both of us. His arguments are elite. I'm gonna have to start hacking into his computer to see if I can try to find his notes quickly, guys. Before we head into Shoot the Gap, the ultimate IDP show with Jorge Edwards, Hollywood Titan, and Nate Markham. Let's quickly run through Ring the Alarm. I'm going to give you guys three players, and you're going to quickly, if you're going to tell me ring the alarm or cancel the alert. First, Rhett. Puka Nacua, season output, 64 receptions, 827 yards, 2 touchdowns, wide receiver 10 in points per game with 14.1, wide receiver 5 in total fantasy points in 127.1, finishes over the last 4 weeks, wide receiver 61, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 65, and wide receiver 51. We made this segment before the Carson Wentz signing. But does that do anything for you? Are we ringing the alarm or are we canceling the alert on rookie sensation Puka Nacua?
No offense, Drew, we're ringing the alarm, despite the fact that the rest of season rankings have him as a wide receiver 12. My man has not found the end zone since week 5, has an up and down rest of schedule. Seattle, Arizona, Cleveland, Baltimore, Washington, New Orleans, New York Giants. There may be spots for success, but has the league caught up to him is that question I want to ask you guys. He's not super athletic, which tells me he could either be Keenan Allen or Kelvin Benjamin going forward. And Keenan Allen is definitely an outlier in terms of what these wide receivers are in terms of not so athletic guys. So he's shown me that he can produce, but with his current question marks that he's had in this lack of production over the past month, the alarm is with an asterisk for me now because we're not sure what it's going to be the rest of the year.
Yep. That's fair. All right, Drew, I got one for you here. Another rookie sensation, a guy that a lot of people had pretty high ranked preseason. His coaches come out and pretty much sewered any kind of fantasy production that he's been going to get made available to for us as fantasy managers. But Bijan Robinson, running back for the Atlanta Falcons, ring the alarm or cancel the alert?
Oh, Arthur Smith, we meet again. We're ringing the alarm on Bijan, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with Bijan and everything to do with his head coach that continues to think he's outsmarting everybody else whenever he's actually not. I just had this rant a couple of weeks ago, but nothing's changed since then. So fuck it, let's just run it back. So despite having 13 less carries than Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson has 146 more rushing yards. He's averaging almost 2 more yards per carry. His explosive run percentage is 3 points higher than Algier's. He has a higher yards after contact per attempt, and a lower percentage of his runs are getting stuffed. All this per Fantasy Points data suite. Thank you, Fantasy Points, for the great data. And despite what Arthur Smith might try to tell you, he's also better in short yardage situation than Tyler Algier. In short yard situations, his yards per attempt is 5.7 compared to Algier's 2.3. He has a 65% success rate compared to Algier's 57%. Arthur will also tell you that the Falcons need to get in the red zone more often. Hey, that much we can agree about. You're right on that. But what did the Falcons do last week whenever they got inside the 5-yard line? You asked me, Chris Battistel? They gave Tyler Algier 2 attempts, and they gave Jonnu Smith a rushing attempt. And they left Bijan with none. Zilch. No rushing attempts for Bijan. We're going to give him to Jonnu Smith instead. And that's the only thing that Algier is better at than Bijan is getting his damn coach to give him the ball in the red zone. That's it. That's the only thing he's actually better at. At this point, our only hope is that Arthur Smith either gets fired or he finally comes to the realization that if he doesn't start giving his best players the ball, he's going to get fired. So for all those reasons, none of which has anything to do with Bijan himself, he has been everything as advertised. We have to ring the alarm on Bijan.
Yep, that's fair, man. You read that so fast. It was almost like the Atlanta Falcons were a prescription drug, and you were reading all the fine print to the people taking the drug of the side effects of starting Atlanta Falcons players. So ring the alarm.
Burnt into my brain.
Ring the alarm on Bijan Robinson. Last but not least, it's been an all rookie. Ring the alarm for us. Rhett Zay Flowers. His output as of late has been abysmal. He's been pretty much not a big part of the passing offense at all. But are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on Zay Flowers?
Talent is obvious, but how he's been used hasn't been great, so we're ringing the alarm. Zay is on pace for well over 100 targets, but he's only averaging 10.5 yards per reception and has not eclipsed 54 air yards at all this season. So that's scary. The question is long-term and for the rest of the season, is he going to emerge as Jahan Dotson, a small guy with a deep threat, or is he another Rondale Moore who we all know had the tools but wasn't quite used in the way he was supposed to be? He's only averaged 1.64 yards per route run. That is running back territory for the season. He's won in man and zone. I believe those percentages are 43 and 55% respectively. But the Ravens are set up to run and control games with how they're set up this year, and they've been very good at it. So the usage and the current setup don't play well for Zay Flowers this season. I'm going to say ring the alarm. And his rest of season success doesn't line up, and neither does his schedule. So ring the alarm on Zay.
Yeah, heavy segment there with a lot of those guys. One last question before we let you guys go. From Christian Maldonado, 12-man PPR, 2 flex. Trade Adams and Pollard for Kyler, Taysom Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has Goff, McBride, Kamara, H.A. Mostert, Kareem Hunt, Khalil Herbert, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, or trade Pollard and Godwin for, I'm assuming, Keenan Allen, Taysom Hill, or Debo, but it might be Josh Allen if he's got Kyler in the first one there. If you just want to give us a little clarification there, Christian, before we go. But if you guys want to start off with the top one, Drew?
Amon-Ra is a clear upgrade for me for Devontae Adams with the situation that he's dealing with in Vegas that they refused to free him of prior to the deadline. He did say Josh Allen is the Allen. Okay. So there wasn't a huge difference for me between Kyler and Goff rest of season, but Josh Allen, there's definitely a difference between him and Goff. His tight end.
Allen, Taysom, and Debo. I mean, Taysom's inevitable every week now.
Yeah, right.
Whether you love it or not.
It's tough. I mean, I'm assuming this is one quarterback since it wasn't. It said otherwise. I think I'd be all right doing either one of those trades, honestly. Do you want the upgrade at wide receiver with going from Adams to Amon-Ra, or do you want the upgraded quarterback getting Josh Allen instead of starting Jared Goff every week? But I think either one of those are okay trades to make, honestly.
Rhett, any take?
I lean the quarterback side with the Josh Allen trade simply because he had some rushing upside and gives you another de facto running back at times. So I kind of like that. Konami quarterbacks work well, but Kyler kind of gives you that too. So flip a coin. I don't know.
And you're getting a Konami tight end in Taysom Hill. There's no other tight end in the league that's rushing for TDs, passing TDs, catching TDs.
Yeah, you're right.
That is
you're
Taysom
right.
Hill, the ultimate money machine in the red zone for the New Orleans Saints. That's it for us. Make sure you stick around for Shoot the Gap, who's coming up right after us, the ultimate IDP show for Fantasy in Frames. Make sure you follow Rhett at R Manual Sports, Drew at Drew3MR, and myself at FF Chris B. And most importantly, go to www.fantasyinframes.com to find all the Fantasy in Frames content across the board. Follow at Fantasy in Frames on all social media platforms. That's it for us tonight. Thanks for everyone who joined in, dropped the question, like the stream, and subscribe to the channel. Toodaloo.